Hey, thanks for clicking on this fighting game video. I'm Dimz, Wagwan. So today I'm going to bring up and talk about a niche topic, or I guess an observation I see in a few fighting games. And specifically I'm going to be talking about two strange implementations of what we call in fighting games a counter-DP. But just a quick tutorial or a refresher is in order in this video to make sure that everyone's on the same page. You can skip ahead if you like, and there's chapters in the video below if you want to skip around that way as well. So, what is a DP? So a DP is also known as a Dragon Punch or a Shoryuken in fighting games. This move originated mainly in the fighting game series Street Fighter. For this video, all you need to know is that a DP is a special move that is mainly supposed to be used for anti-air purposes. And of course, an anti-air or anti-aerial is an attack or move that you would use in order to swat your opponents out the air if they keep jumping at you. A DP does this really well because it's usually a rising uppercut that covers a good range of space above and in front of you. DPs also have a more defensive purpose as well because they make really good reversals, since usually DPs are invincible on startup, which means usually if someone's going to hit you or you anticipate them to hit you, you can just throw out a DP. The startup frames will make you immune to all attacks, usually. So with such a good sounding move that a DP is, it usually is balanced out by the fact that if you miss or if your opponent blocks your DP, then you're usually left wide open for an attack or a counter attack. It's also balanced out by the fact that most DPs, you usually have to do a DP motion or a Shoryuken motion or a 6-3-2-4 or what's known as a Z motion for obvious reason. This motion isn't the easiest to input in a rapid fire succession over and over and over. So the balance is that sometimes you just might mess up and it won't come out every single time. Now for explanation number 2. What is a counter? A counter is a special move that makes your character enter a certain stance. And if you are hit by your opponent during this stance, your character will perform a countermeasure. The exact type and power of this countermeasure is always character dependent. But one thing that is a constant is that counters are triggered by your opponent's attacks. Usually only the moves that would beat counters are grabs. Usually. Now with those two out of the way, time to move on to this video's topic. Counter-DPs. So essentially, counter-DPs are reversals that rely on your opponents to trigger. Though it's very similar to your standard counter, the classification of a counter DP for this video is going to assume that it's the character's only or go-to desperation move to escape pressure. Objectively speaking, counter DPs are worse than regular uppercut DPs, just because having a move only triggered based on your opponent's input is worse than having complete agency over your moves. There's multiple ways to balance these moves, but let's look at two examples of how these moves were balanced in two different games, one weaker and one stronger. Let's start with the weaker one, and it's in the game Duel. So, in DNF Duel, there's two characters with counter DPs, Grappler and Lost Warrior. DPs in the game can be done by inputting the Z motion or by using a command normal. That's universal for everyone. What's not universal is how strong someone's DP is or how it hits. Let's take a look at an average DP like Inquisitors. Her DP is invulnerable on frame 0 or frame 1 if you prefer, and it hits on frame 10. Most can agree that this is how a normal DP should work. Now, for Grappler and Lost Warrior, their DPs does not work on projectiles. Their DPs can be grabbed. For some reason on top of all that, their DPs loses to lows. Their DP does not work on low attacks. Yes, while I do know that in certain games there are characters with counters that loses to lows. But for those characters, that counter isn't their main reversal. They usually have another method of covering that low weakness. Lost Warrior and Grappler do not. This means other characters are free to continue pressuring them when they are knocked down, with rapid fire lows for instance. Which is scary because in this game, some characters get full combos off of their lows. I mean, even if you guess right and use the counter, it doesn't do any more damage than anyone else's DP in the game would. It's just more riskier. It's basically to the point where unless you get the call out read on your opponent's attack, you're better off just guarding and using guard cancel. So this is a desperation move that's meant to get you out of a tight spot, but because of how it's handled in DNF Duel, it becomes a liability to where you don't even want to use the move most of the times. I honestly am not sure what they was thinking when they made the rules for counters in this game, and even more so that after their first major update where they gave the counters like frame 1 invulnerability and activation, they still left that it loses to low attacks. That still baffles me to this day. Now for the flip side, we saw an undertuned version of this type of move, a counter DP. Now let's look at an overtuned one, and the game we are looking at is
Cross Tag Battle!
In Blaze Blue Cross Tag Battle, or BBTAG for short, they have DPs. Not only do they have DPs, but it's all performed with just one button. That's pretty strong, all things considered, but in BBTAG, there's a variety of DPs. You have your standard uppercut DPs, DPs that hit on both sides, DPs with very specific hitboxes, DPs that have follow-ups after, and then you have this thing. So, of course, with the different variety of DPs, you know that this game has counter DPs. Now, without getting into the different variety of counter DPs, let me just explain how DPs work in general in this game. In BBTAG, DPs are completely invincible on startup, and has your character turn red temporarily. Also, in BBTAG, characters can block mostly all attacks while airborne. Mostly. One attack that is unable to be blocked while airborne is a DP. Because of this, there are situations where you can actually set up true unblockables in this game.
Look at you trying so. Do it. Let's go. A little treat.
Not so easy.
Take it away. Fight the good fight. Do I have to? How's that for taste?
Now, talking about counter DPs, well, since counter DPs have to be triggered, you cannot use counter DPs to hit someone while they're airborne. Though that seems like a bummer, one way this game makes up for that is that you are unable to grab someone who's doing a counter DP, but instead, it will activate their counter as if you hit them. Now, I do know that you can't really grab a normal DP, but it just feels weird since in every other fighting game, grabbing someone in a counter stance is usually the viable option. It's just something that's hard to unlearn if you're familiar with it with other fighting games, specifically for this fighting game. Anywho, time to talk about which counter DP I think is overtuned. There's a few different counter DPs in BBTAG, but the one that I think that's pretty darn strong is attached to a character named Elizabeth.
My attack!
So first, let me show you what her DP looks like. Now, this DP on the surface seems to be nothing special, but it does a lot for her. For starters, the animation of it is deceptive, so it's kinda hard to tell when it's no longer active. Her and Yosuke's have the identical frame data on their DPs, but it's way easier to tell when Yosuke is in recovery and can be punished. This does matter because if you're too early, you'll trigger the DP, and if you are too late, then she'll be able to block. Her being able to block means that she'll be able to act. And though her fastest move is around 7 to 8 frames, she does have a frame 1 move in her DP. Yes, this means if she is panicked and assuming that you're going to attack her for whipping DP, she could just cover herself by just using DP again. Now, this isn't a unique thing that only Elizabeth's DP can do, but what is unique is her DP range of activation. Elizabeth's DP can be triggered at ranges where other counter DPs can't or will be less effective at. Not only that, but her DP, when triggered, sucks the opponent in and spits them out at mid-range. Mid-range is where Elizabeth excels at. And if you're just looking for a little more icing on the cake that is Elizabeth's DP, she can use her DPs to cancel some move strings, which open up more opportunities for her to extend her combos. This is something that I find that's actually really cool. I wish more counter DPs and more characters, regardless of game, had this utility for their counter DP. Since with the standard uppercut DPs, you can have the utility of using it offensively or defensively as reversals, or even combo enders, why not have counter DPs be used in mid combos for extenders? I don't know, I'm just spitballing there. Now, with all this talk about Elizabeth, you would think that knowing nothing about BBTAG, that she would have to be top tier, right? Well, she's not. BBTAG is a wild game, and if I were to make a tier list in just 2 seconds, I would say maybe the S tier would be Adachi and Yumi, since they make a really good team by just existing on the team. Heck, they even make a great team just by being with each other. While everyone else, I would throw in A tier because everyone is viable. It's always dependent on your team composition. And then I guess maybe I'll throw Makoto from Blaze Blue into B tier because for any reason you would pick her, someone does her job better. So, just a recap. Counter DPs in DNF Duel are undertuned because without the immunity to lows and the fact that characters can full combo you off of their lows, this makes using counter DP less viable option compared to just blocking or guard canceling. While in BBTAG, Elizabeth's counter DP in BBTAG is a bit overtuned because her recovery animation is a bit deceptive, BBTAG DPs in general are immune to grabs, her range of activation for her DP is so great, and she can use it as a combo extender. All in all, I just wanted to make this video just to report my random findings. I apologize for my voice, sinuses and such. Let me know if you actually found any other weird balancing of counter DPs in any other games. I just like seeing the different forms of balancing of a similar mechanic or tools between different games. Well, and with that said, I've been Dimz, and you all just have a wonderful day.